So the question is, how long should you take off from throwing per calendar year? You've just had a big season, you just got done throwing a lot and pitching a lot. How long should you take off before you get into your on-ramping and return to throw progression and ultimately your off-season training? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Max Wardell, Overhead Athletics. Today we're talking about how long you should take off after a season or after a competitive season, or even just how long should I take off per year. We know that athletes have varying seasons. Some athletes are gonna play fall ball, summer ball, school ball. Some athletes are just gonna play school ball. Some are gonna play summer and school. So the seasons vary a little bit. And that's why our recommendation for how long you should take off of throwing is gonna vary a little bit. The athlete who throws for 8 months of the year competitively, you gotta think he's probably gonna need a little bit more rest than somebody who throws for 3 months of the year competitively. Also depends on how intense your training is. But we know that if you take too long of a rest period, you're going to increase the likelihood of injury because you're going to be detrained. You're not going to be up to the level that you need to be going into your subsequent season. So this is particularly true when we get athletes that shut down for 3 and 4 months in the off season. They train for 1 month, then they go into the next season. They're not prepared whatsoever for the demands of their sport. They go out there and they get injured in the first few weeks and first few months. That's why if we look at the major leagues, we see that the majority of injuries happen when? Right in the beginning in spring training. And part of that is because the delta or the change in their activity levels is way too rapid. They do too much too quick a lot of times, even with our professional athletes, where they end up throwing a lot more than they did in the off season. They're doing a lot more, they're throwing a lot harder, they're trying to impress the coaches, impress the staff, and they end up blowing out the arm. We want to avoid that. As a physical therapist, I see the negative ramifications of throwing too much and not taking enough downtime, but I'm also seeing the negative ramifications of not throwing enough and then having subsequent injuries. So I'd say my general recommendation is 4 to 6 weeks. However, don't click off this video just because I said 4 to 6 weeks. Let's talk about some of the nuances here. A standard high school baseball player that plays through high school baseball and plays up until maybe June through June, maybe into July. 4 to 6 weeks is a good metric for him, sometimes 4 weeks. If you're that high school baseball player that threw way more than you're used to and you're dealing with arm pain at the end of the season, that's a scenario where you should maybe consider taking another few weeks off, maybe increasing it up to 10 weeks. Take 10 weeks off starting at the end of July. Say take 1 week off in July, you got 9 more weeks to take. You still got a lot of training time. You still have a lot of time to get ready for that next season. But if you don't take enough time and you take 4 weeks and you're still dealing with some lingering pain and discomfort, and you go back into throwing too soon, you've never given your body enough time to recover. So there's something else we need to talk about in that scenario, which is if you've taken 4 weeks off or 6 weeks off and you're still having discomfort in your shoulder and elbow, you need to get evaluated. I suggest you get evaluated first in physical therapy by a sports physical therapist who can do a comprehensive assessment on you and who understands throwing athletes. And the average physical therapist, orthopedic physical therapist, works with about 1.7 baseball players per calendar year. So if you only work with 1.7, then basically you work with 3 baseball players in a 2-year period, you're not going to be very trained on what you need to understand as far as throwing athletes. So you want to find a therapist who truly understands throwing athletes, has clinical experience working with them, and understands the pathology or the injuries that come along with throwing. Once you've been assessed and you have a plan put together, you need to start working on that plan. We generally have guys only take 2 weeks off total downtime after a season, but after those 2 weeks, they might not be throwing. They might be working on some of their corrective exercise, some of their arm care stuff, getting their rotator cuff and forearm as strong as possible. For our college guys, it becomes much more difficult to take downtime, particularly if you're going into that freshman year or sophomore year where you really need to prove yourself to the coaching staff. A lot of times, guys are going through ball in the spring, then they go through summer ball season. Now they go into campus in the fall, and they're going to go through fall ball. This was a difficulty at an NAIA school where I played, where you'd go all the way through the summer, you'd go into the next year, you got a full fall ball season that goes all the way up into November. You've got November and December where you're not practicing with the team as much, and then bam, January hits, second day of January, you're right into practice. You got 2 months right there. And if you take those 2 months completely off, like a lot of guys did, they went into practice and then their arms are dragging, and they're in the same scenario as those guys who went to spring training that weren't prepared. So with our college guys, we generally will try to recommend, hey, either you take your break in the summer, the beginning of summer, and don't play summer ball, which for college athletes, unless you're going to a high competitive summer ball league as a pitcher, probably not that important. As a position player, it's great because you're going to get more at bats, you're going to get more repetition in live game scenarios. But as a pitcher, unless you didn't play much in your college season, what's the point? Either take your time off, and this goes for pitchers and position players, take some time off, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, beginning of the summer, right when college ball ends, or try to take November off, get back into throwing that second week in December, or something like that, so that you at least have a few weeks to ramp up prior to coming in for winter practice inside here, but outside down south. So 4 weeks, fit it in if you can. Active recovery is key during those 4 to 6 weeks, and then working on bringing up your strength levels, and anything that you saw an asymmetry in or an inefficiency in, strength, flexibility, you need to start working on that. Bam, season ends, or even during that offseason, make it a focus. So you're not loading your arm so much, you're not loading the inert tissue, the connective tissue, the ligament tissue, the joint tissue as much because you're not throwing, but you're still preparing your arm, your shoulder, your body to be able to get back on the field and throw. So kind of a complex answer. Generally, we recommend about 4 to 6 weeks. I don't typically recommend too much longer than that unless somebody's dealing with some arm pain and injury. And in that case, you gotta get checked out. You can't just take the time off and hope it goes away. Failing to have a plan here is planning to fail. Make sure you have a plan if you're dealing with some arm discomfort, and get that taken care of, because sometimes you think it's minor, it's still minor in 8 weeks, it's still minor after that, and then you realize you tore your UCL or something like that. That could have been rehabbed conservatively if you would have just gone through therapy before. Now you're missing part of your season. So to avoid that, take care of your ailments, injuries, pain, aches right away. Don't neglect them just because you're taking a rest time. I hope that answers everybody's question. There's some nuances here. There's some different things that have to happen. Some guys aren't going to be able to take 4 to 6 weeks. It's understandable. Know that you're running a little bit more injury risk potentially. And then again, despite the fact that you may have heard you need to take 8 weeks, 3 months, whatever, I would say you want to be very cautious in doing so, because taking too long off is going to require you to on-ramp and increase your intensity over a much longer period of time that most athletes aren't going to do and don't have time for, and are going to end up going into the next season ill-prepared and then encountering an injury. So let's avoid our early season injuries by being really prepared, being at a high intensity in throwing prior to going in. And let's avoid our overtraining type of not recovering type of injuries by giving us a few weeks of decompression time. It's psychological improvement and improving arm strength, improving core strength, correcting asymmetries, and improving flexibility during that time off. If you guys like this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the bell for notifications, because I know a lot of people are missing these videos. So hit that bell, and we'll see you guys in the next video.